Buying the wrong type of home in Calgary could cost you tens of thousands of dollars or leave you stuck with a property that nobody else wants. I've toured hundreds of homes across this city and I've seen every red flag there is. Families move in, and within a year, they realize they can't live with the noise, the hidden problems, or the resale headaches. So, in this video, I'm going to break down the types of homes I would never buy here in Calgary. And most importantly, what you should do if you're still tempted. Because, yes, some of these can work, but only if you know the risk before you buy. And make sure you stick around until the end because the last one on my list may be the most expensive mistake of them all. So let's kick off with one of the most common mistakes I see buyers make in Calgary: buying a home on a busy road. On paper, it doesn't always seem like a big deal. You find a nice house, maybe even in a great community, and the price looks a little bit better than the rest. But here's why: busy roads are a resale nightmare. I'll give you an example. I had a showing in a really desirable community. The house checked a lot of boxes: renovated kitchen, great yard, and even a double garage. But the backyard backed right onto Stony Trail. Now, when you first walk through the home, you're impressed. It feels like a win. But the second you step into the backyard, it's game over. Even though Stony looks far enough away, you still hear everything: the hum of the traffic, the brakes squealing, and most noticeably, the deep growl of semi trucks shifting gears. And that sound doesn't stop. It's every day, every hour, 24/7. And here's the thing: even if you think, well, I can live with that, your future buyers might not. Families with kids often worry about safety, light sleepers think about noise, and most people just don't want to hang out in the backyard where conversation stops every time a truck rumbles by. And resale stats back this up. Homes on main roads or backing onto major arteries almost always sit longer on the market. Sometimes they sell at a discount compared to similar homes on fewer streets over. The difference could be tens of thousands of dollars just because of location. So while the lower sticker price on a busy road might tempt you now, you need to weigh that against the frustration of living with the noise. Now, me personally, I grew up on a major street that was a thoroughfare to all the other communities. And one of the biggest issues that I saw while living there was, first, even though the speed limit was 50 kilometers an hour, most people still sped a lot more. And that's the issue with a lot of wider roads, is that people generally speed than the recommended speed limit. And because of the speed, there's actually multiple accidents on my street with drivers driving into the back of parked cars. And at one time, someone even drove through a house. So take it from someone who grew up on a busy road, I wouldn't recommend it. And if you think road noise is bad, wait until you're dealing with bells, horns, and trains shaking the walls. On paper, transit access sounds like a huge perk. Who wouldn't want to walk outside and hop on a train downtown? But when you live too close, the convenience turns into a constant frustration. Take the C train as an example. Every time a train rolls in, you've got the bells ringing, brakes screeching, and sometimes even the low rumble that carries through the walls. And trains don't just run during rush hour. They run late into the night and start again early in the morning. That means you never really get away from the noise. Now, bus stops bring their own issues: people waiting right outside your house, cars pulling over consistently, and buses braking and hissing all day long. It's not just the noise, it's the lack of privacy. Having strangers gathered outside your living room window makes a lot of buyers uncomfortable. And here's the resale problem: when future buyers come to view the property, they notice it almost right away. And buyers get turned off, and that reaction cuts down your buyer pool pretty fast. Now, being near transit is great, but not right on top of it. So, if buying a home near transit is really important to you, just consider maybe being a few streets over rather than right beside it. Now, schools, everyone loves being close to them until they realize what actually happens right across the street. Schools can be one of the biggest double edged swords in real estate. Everyone wants to be in a good school district, but very few people actually want to live right across from the school. And here's why: in Calgary, most kids aren't walking or biking to school. They're being dropped off and picked up by a car. So that means twice a day, every weekday. You've got a lineup of vehicles clogging the streets, parents stopping wherever they can, quick U turns, people parking half on the curb just to grab their kids. It's organized chaos. And if you live across the street, you're stuck in it every single morning and afternoon. And it's not just elementary schools, it with high schools, you add another wrinkle: teen drivers, students just learning to drive, or freshly licensed are suddenly filling up the street. You'll see them practicing parallel parking, pulling into tight spots, or idling for long stretches. For homeowners, that translates into a crowded street, more noise, and sometimes safety concerns with inexperienced drivers everywhere. The resale problem is obvious. Buyers picture that congestion and think about living with it day in and day out. Many walk away before they even seen the inside of the house. So while being by a good school is a plus, being right beside one is often a headache that follows you the entire time you own the property. And usually again when you try to sell it. And speaking of constant noise, Calgary has one of the busiest airports in the country. Another location mistake I see far too often is buying near the Calgary International Airport, or YYC, or under one of its flight paths. At first glance, these homes can seem like a deal. You'll sometimes see lower prices compared to similar houses a few communities over. But there's a reason for that: airplane noise. YYC is one of the busiest airports in the country. A plane lands or takes off here about 400 to 500 times a day. Now, that averages out to roughly one flight every 2.5 to 3 minutes. And when you're in the direct path, you don't just hear the planes, you sometimes feel them. Windows and walls rattle, conversation stops, and it's a reminder every few minutes that you live under an active runway. Now, some people say you'll get used to it, and that might be true for you, but here's the real issue. When you go to resell, the next buyer walking through your house will notice it immediately. They'll step outside to see the yard, and within minutes, a plane flies right over top of you. First impressions matter, and for many, that's an instant deal breaker. It's just not noise either. With airport comes more traffic, heavy industrial zoning nearby, and in some cases, extra air pollution. It all combines to make these homes harder to sell and usually at a discount. So, unless you're the type of person who loves planes, living under YYC's flight path, it's one of the riskiest location moves you can make. But here's the thing: noise you can tune out. Water, however, water will ruin you. Now, Calgary is a river city. We've got the Bow River, the Elbow, and Glenmore Reservoir all cutting through its communities. And while these areas can be beautiful, they also come with a very real risk. If you lived here long enough, you'll remember the 2013 floods. Whole communities like Sunnyside, Bowness, and parts of Mission were underwater. Thousands of families were displaced, and the damage was in the billions. Even today, homes in those areas carry that history. Buyers remember, and insurance companies also remember, and the stigma never fully disappears. Take Discovery Ridge as another example. After the 2013 floods, residents of the Wedgwood complex were hit with a $13 million in damages. The water rushed into their underground parkade so quickly that people had to evacuate within minutes. Since then, the community literally had to build their own berm at a cost of over $2.2 million paid by the residents themselves, just to protect their homes in the future. That's the kind of financial burden you might inherit when buying in a flood prone area. And here's the hard truth: even if a home itself looks fine and has never flooded, being on that map as part of the floodplain will impact your resale. Buyers are hesitant, lenders may add conditions, and insurance premiums can skyrocket. Or in some cases, coverage is simply denied. Now, I've personally have dealt with this as a real estate agent for a buyer who bought a Beltline condo that was impacted by the 2013 floods. It was very hard going through the financial process to find a lender who would even loan on this type of property. Now, luckily, we were able to find one, but it was quite difficult and it took a lot of talking and convincing just to be able to get my client the financing that he needed. Now, to be fair, not every river adjacent community is unlivable. Calgary has invested heavily in flood mitigation since 2013, but if you're considering buying in these areas, you need to do your homework. Check the city of Calgary's flood maps, ask about past claims, and factor in the cost of potential insurance. Because while the Bow River might look peaceful on a sunny day, history shows us it can turn destructive overnight. And even if the lot is perfect, what's behind the walls can bankrupt you even faster than the flood. One of the sneakiest risks when buying a home in Calgary is hidden right inside the walls and pipes. These would be outdated or unsafe building materials. These are things you might not notice during a showing, but they can turn into a massive expense and even health risks once you move in. And the first one you should know about is Poly B. If you see a gray plastic pipe in a home built between the late 1970s and mid 1990s, that's likely what you're looking at. Now, at the time, it was marketed as the future of plumbing. It was cheap, flexible, and easy to install. But here's the problem: Poly B itself doesn't age well. Over time, it can become brittle, it cracks, and starts to leak, sometimes without warning. I've seen buyers walk into what they thought was a dream home, only to find out later they were on the hook for $15,000 to $20,000 for a full repipe. And on top of that, some insurance in Calgary won't even cover a home with Poly B unless it's replaced. That alone can drop the deal quite quickly. Now, here's the thing about Poly B. Poly B was installed across tens of thousands of homes across Canada and the United States. Now, while there are a lot of companies out there who will make a lot of fear mongering around Poly B, what you should know is that when Poly B is fine and it's not cracked or leaking, it's fine. It's in tens of thousands of homes. However, when it does break, it can become a problem and it can become a problem quite quickly. So, if you are going to buy an older home with Poly B, do your homework and be prepared to potentially even change it yourself later on, or just to be a little bit more attentive to your walls and ceilings. Now, moving on, there's asbestos. If a home was built before the 1980s, there's a good chance it contains some. It was used in insulation, floor tiles, drywall compound, duct wrap, you name it. And here's the scary part: when the asbestos fibers get disrupted, they can enter the air and cause long term health issues like lung cancer. Now, the removal process is highly regulated and can cost tens of thousands of dollars. If you're considering an older home, asbestos testing is not optional, it's essential. Another thing to watch for is lead pipes. These were common before the 1950s, and while Calgary has replaced many of its lead services lines, there are still homes with them. Lead can leach into drinking water, and health agencies have been clear there is no safe level of exposure, especially for children. If the home still has lead lines, you want to budget thousands for replacements. Now, finally, knob and tube wiring. This type of electrical system shows up in Calgary's pre 1950s home. Now, while it might still work, it was designed for a completely different era, before air conditioners, microwaves, and modern electronics. That means it's not only a fire hazard, but most insurance companies won't cover a home until the wiring is updated. And updating it isn't a small project. It usually means tearing open walls and starting from fresh. So while older homes can have incredible character, the risk is what's hiding inside the walls and under the floor. If you consider one, budget for professional inspections, testing, and possibly major upgrades. Otherwise, what looks like a charming home today can turn into a health hazard or money pit tomorrow. Which brings us to our next one, which is tips. Everyone loves shiny countertops. Nobody loves what's hiding underneath them. Now, flip homes on the surface can look amazing. You walk in and everything is shiny, modern, and staged to perfection. You got new flooring, fresh paint, trendy finishes, and it all looks like a move in ready dream home. But here's the reality: not every flip is created equal. And in Calgary, I've seen a lot of them that are more trouble than they are worth. The real problem comes down to quality versus cosmetics. Now, some flippers do great work. They replace the windows, update the roof, pull the proper permits, and bring everything up to code. Those are the homes worth considering. But many others, they cut corner. They'll spend money on what you can see, like quartz countertops, new light fixtures, but they'll leave the expensive stuff untouched. The furnace is 25 years old, the roof is near end of its life, and the basement was finished without permits. All of that becomes your problem the moment you take possession. And one of the biggest red flags I've noticed in flipped homes is the little details. If you walk through and see crooked tiles, mismatched baseboards, or doors that don't close properly, that tells you something about how the rest of the renovation was done. If they didn't take care of the basics for what you can see, how do you think they cared about what you can't see hidden behind the walls? Another thing to watch for is permits. In Calgary, any major work like plumbing, electrical, structural changes requires a permit. Yet I've toured flip properties where sellers couldn't even produce a single one. That's a huge risk. Oh, no permits means no official inspection, and that leaves you exposed to safety issues and expensive fixes later on. And here's another tip: always look at the sales history. If a home was purchased just a year ago at a much lower price and it's relisted at a big markup with new renovations, that's your clue. It was a quick flip. Sometimes these homes resell multiple times in just a few years, which is a sign buyers keep discovering problems after moving in. Now, to be fair, not every flipped home is bad. There are some fantastic builders and renovators in Calgary who take pride in their work. If you know who did the renovations and they have a track record of quality, it can be worth it. But for the average buyer, my advice is this: walk into a flip with a very healthy dose of skepticism. Hire a thorough home inspector, ask for permits, and don't get blinded by shiny finishes. Because at the end of the day, it's what's behind the walls and under the roof that really matters. And now there's also court order sales. Now, people think you're getting a steal. Well, here's a spoiler: it's not always the case. Now, sometimes court order sales are called judicial sales. On the surface, they sound like a great deal. A lot of buyers hear the word foreclosure and immediately think bargain. And the reality is, in Calgary, Court sales are rarely the steals people imagine, and in many cases, they come with far more risk than reward. In the United States, the foreclosure system works differently. Down there, banks typically sell the property for whatever is left on the mortgage. So if someone owed $200,000 on a house worth $400,000, you might actually be able to scoop it up close to that $200,000 mark. That's where the idea of steals and smoking deals comes from. But here in Canada, it doesn't work that way. Our system requires that the banks and the courts sell the home at a fair market value, not the amount left on the mortgage. That means if the property is worth 400,000, the bank is going to list it for something in that range regardless of whether the owner owned $200,000 or not. So you're not actually getting a bargain. You're just buying at the same market price as everyone else. Now, let's add another layer to the issues. The first is conditions. With a typical resale, you can write your offer subject to financing, a home inspection, or condo document review. With a court order sale, those conditions often aren't allowed. You're buying the property exactly as it sits, with no guarantees about the condition or no ability to back out if something goes wrong. The second issue is timing. On a regular purchase, you'll hear back in a day or two. With a court sale, it can take weeks. I've seen buyers sit for a month waiting for court decisions only to find out they weren't successful. That ties up your time and your focus when you could be pursuing another home. And here's the kicker, because banks and courts are required to sell at market value, most court order sales in Calgary end up selling for roughly the same price as the traditional listing. Sometimes they even get multiple offers and sell above list. That supposed deal disappears pretty quickly. Now, there are buyers who can make court sales work. Sure, usually cash buyers, investors, or people who can handle risk and unexpected repairs. But the average Calgary homebuyer, the risks far outweigh the rewards. My advice is simple. If you're looking for your first home, moving your family, or just want peace of mind, stick to a traditional resale. Court order sales in Canada are not like the US. You're not getting a fire sale discount, and the uncertainty just isn't worth it for most buyers. Now, the last type of property I'd be cautious about are the ones with over the top custom features. Now, don't get me wrong, unique homes can be amazing to look at. But when it comes to the resale in Calgary, being too unique can actually be a problem. And let's first start with pools. In most cities, a backyard pool is seen as a luxury. Here in Calgary, it's usually the opposite. The reason being is because they're expensive to maintain. And frankly, we don't have a long enough summer to justify it. That means instead of adding value, pools often turn buyers away. I've personally seen listings with pools that sat on the market far longer than similar homes without them. And when they do sell, they often sell for less. If you're a pool person and you know you'll use it every day in the summer, no problem. But don't expect it to boost your resale value. And then there are indoor pools. These are even tougher. They require year round upkeep. Insurance companies often raise red flags, and the moisture alone can cause long term problems with the home. I've seen properties with beautiful indoor pools that still struggle to sell even after hundreds of showings, simply because buyers don't want to deal with any of the maintenance. Now, another issue I see is a massive custom kitchens. I once toured a property with a $300,000 mahogany kitchen. Beautiful cabinets, every detail hand carved, and the seller was proud of it, and rightfully so. But the problem was it had only appealed to a very small group of buyers. Everyone walked in, took one look, and thought, that's a $300,000 kitchen I'm going to rip out. We're talking over the top finishes like that don't always translate into higher value. And then you've got the statement features, giant built in fish tanks, indoor waterfalls, bright red kitchens, and even secret rooms or man caves designed around one person's hobby. Cool, yes. But when you go to sell, those features can actually limit your market. Buyers either see them as expensive to remove or they just can't picture themselves living in the space. Now, here's a positive spin. If you're planning to stay in the house long term and you generally love these features, then great. You should enjoy them. Just go in with eyes wide open, knowing you may not see that money come back on the resale. But if you're buying with the intent to sell in the few years or you're trying to build equity, over the top customizations are one of the easiest ways to paint yourself into a corner. In Calgary, buyers value practical over flash. And that's something you always need to keep in mind. But you don't need to foreclose to overpay. Sometimes it's the custom wow factor that can drop a deal. So here's the bottom line, avoid these traps and you'll already be ahead of most buyers. And now, if you're serious about buying in Calgary, YouTube thinks you'll love this next video. the step by step guide of buying your first home here in Calgary. Click the video, and I'll see you over there.